My name is Elaine Morgan, and I was 61 years old the night my daughter made me the punchline of her own wedding. I remember sitting at a round table covered with white linens, the kind of setting brides dream about: crystal glasses, golden cutlery, a chandelier overhead casting its glow on everything. I had helped pay for half of it, though almost no one in that room knew. I thought my role that evening was simple smile, stay in the background, and let Hannah have the perfect day she had always wanted. Then she took the microphone. I expected gratitude, maybe a tender story about family. Instead, she grinned at 200 guests and said, "I want to thank my mom for her late-life crisis." The words stung sharper than the champagne in my glass. Laughter rippled through the room. She leaned into it, calling my company a little empire dream complete with finger quotes. People clapped, some even wiping tears of amusement, while I forced a smile so my cheeks wouldn't betray the fire burning inside me. At that moment, I wasn't a proud mother anymore. I was the joke, an old woman foolish enough to believe she still had something to build, something worth respecting. I stared down at my plate, my heart thudding, the voices around me, blurring into one endless laugh track. My daughter had turned my life's work into entertainment, and I could feel the walls of humiliation closing in. But just as I thought I might crumble, I noticed a man at table 6 choking slightly. On his wine, his eyes locked on me. It was Richard Hale, the Groom's boss, a man whose name carried weight in boardrooms. The look on his face wasn't laughter, it was shock, as if he had suddenly recognized me. In that instant, I realized the night wasn't over. My daughter thought she had the last word, but she had no idea what was coming next. 2 years before that wedding night, my life looked nothing like the glittering ballroom where Hannah mocked me. I was sitting alone in a small apartment on the west side of Chicago, staring at a stack of unpaid bills and a severance letter. After 30 years as chief accountant for a healthcare corporation, I had been let go during what they called a strategic restructuring. That was just a polished way of saying they wanted someone younger and cheaper. The silence in that apartment was deafening. My ex-husband had already remarried a woman young enough to be our daughter. Hannah was building a future with Mark, barely stopping by except for quick visits. For the first time in decades, I had no title, no office, and no clear reason to get out of bed each morning. I remember thinking, is this what the rest of my life is going to look like? But despair has a way of cornering you into a decision. Either surrender or fight back. One afternoon, while sipping bitter coffee at the kitchen table, I opened my old leather notebook and began sketching ideas. I still had decades of financial expertise, years of balancing messy budgets and fixing broken systems. Why not use that? That day, the seed of Morgan Strategies was planted. It started small consulting for local shops, helping them organize accounts and cut waste. I didn't even tell my family at first. When Hannah did find out, she rolled her eyes. "Mom, you're 60, not 26. Maybe just enjoy retirement." Her words stung, but they also fueled me. Each dismissive comment became another reason to push harder. Looking back, that was the moment I decided my story wasn't going to end in that lonely apartment. Family dinners became the hardest part of my week. We'd gather at Hannah and Mark's condo downtown, the table always set with expensive wine glasses and trendy dishes she had learned from cooking shows. On the surface, it looked warm and inviting, but underneath every conversation felt like a test. I was destined to fail. "Mom, you didn't tell Mark's parents you're still doing that consulting thing, did you?" Hannah asked one evening, her tone half joking, half warning. She was arranging roasted salmon on plates, but her eyes flicked at me like I was a child about to misbehave. I might have mentioned a client project, I said, carefully folding my napkin to keep my hands steady. She sighed loudly. "Please, Mom, don't embarrass me. Just say you're between jobs. It sounds more respectable." Mark chuckled from across the table, pouring himself a glass of Cabernet. "I think it's kind of cute, actually. Keeps you busy, right? Like a hobby." He spoke as if I were knitting scarves, not negotiating contracts. The room erupted in polite laughter, and I sat there with a frozen smile. Inside, my stomach twisted. Every success I wanted to share, like the cafe I'd helped triple its profits, died on my tongue before it reached my lips. Even my sister joined in at times. "Elaine, why not look for something steady, a clerical job maybe? You missed your chance at anything big. Better to be realistic." Their words stung, not because I doubted my abilities, but because these were the people who were supposed to believe in me. Instead, they boxed me into the role of the aging mother who should fade quietly into the background. I left those dinners smiling on the outside, but each night I drove home gripping the steering wheel tighter, promising myself I wouldn't let their small vision of me define the rest of my life. What no one at those family dinners knew was how quickly my so-called hobby began to grow. At first, it was just small contracts, bookstores, bakeries, small firms struggling with messy ledgers. But each project sharpened my instincts, and each success gave me leverage to reach higher. Within a year, Morgan Strategies was no longer just a consulting gig. It had become a vehicle for acquisitions. I remember my first deal vividly. A small manufacturing company in Joliet was drowning in debt, but I saw potential. While others walked away, I negotiated terms, secured financing, and turned the place around within 6 months. The profit gave me the confidence and capital to aim bigger. From there, opportunities seemed to find me. Mid-sized tech firms, energy startups, logistics companies. One by one, I quietly acquired controlling stakes. I never boasted about it. Not to Hannah, not to my sister, not to anyone. When clients signed contracts, I celebrated alone with takeout and a glass of wine in my modest apartment. The world might have seen an aging divorcee living simply, but behind the scenes, I was building a portfolio worth tens of millions. Sometimes I wanted to tell Hannah. When I saw her scrolling through wedding websites and worrying about budgets, I wanted to say, "Sweetheart, don't stress, I can cover this without blinking." But each time I tried, her smirk or dismissive wave cut me off. To her, I was playing dress-up in the business world. So I bit my tongue, kept my victories private, and let her believe I was scraping by on divorce leftovers. Silence became my armor. If my own daughter thought I was irrelevant, fine. I would let the results speak one day louder than any defense I could ever make. As Hannah's wedding drew closer, my checkbook opened wider. The venue she wanted was a historic hotel outside Chicago, its ballroom lined with tall windows that glowed with evening light. The price tag made me pause, but I signed the deposit without hesitation. I wanted her day to be everything she dreamed of, even if she believed the money came from my divorce settlement. During the rehearsal dinner, Hannah pulled me aside near the coat room. She looked beautiful in a silk dress, but her expression carried that familiar edge. "Mom," she whispered sharply, "please don't talk about your business tomorrow. Mark's boss will be there and a lot of his colleagues. These are serious people. I don't want them thinking my mother is chasing fantasies." I bit down hard on my lip. "You mean Morgan Strategies?" She nodded quickly, glancing around. "Just say you're retired or between jobs. Don't embarrass me." I wanted to shout that I was paying for half of this wedding with money earned from those so-called fantasies. Instead, I forced a smile and said, "Fine, Hannah. I'll keep quiet." That night, back in my hotel room, I laid out the outfit. I'd chosen a navy dress, elegant but understated. Nothing flashy. I didn't want anyone accusing me of stealing the spotlight from the bride. Still, as I hung the dress on the closet door, a thought gnawed at me. Why did my daughter need me to disappear in order for her to shine? The next morning, I slipped into the ballroom before anyone else arrived. The chandeliers were lit tables, set with gleaming cutlery. It was stunning, and for a brief moment, I was glad I had given her this gift. I just didn't know the price would be my own dignity. The ceremony itself was breathtaking. Hannah walked down the aisle in lace and satin, her face glowing beneath a veil. I cried as she said her vows proud despite everything. But the warmth I felt in that chapel didn't survive into the reception. It began with the maid of honor's speech. She tapped her glass, smiling mischievously. "Now let's talk about Hannah's mom," she announced. The crowd leaned in, expecting something sentimental. Instead, she grinned wider. Elaine's been having what we like to call a late-life adventure. At 61, she's decided to build an empire. She curled her fingers into mocking quotation marks. Laughter rippled through the tables. My chest tightened. I forced a smile as the woman continued. We keep telling her to relax, to garden like other moms her age. But nope, she's playing CEO. The room broke into full laughter. I felt my cheeks burn. I thought Hannah would step in, maybe redirect the moment. But when she rose to speak, she only fueled the fire. "Thanks for that," she said into the microphone, eyes glinting. "Yes, Mom has been busy with her little projects. We all try to remind her that some dreams come with expiration dates. At 60, maybe it's time to be realistic." The crowd roared again. Even the servers exchanged knowing looks as they carried plates away. Each laugh was a knife, and I sat frozen, my hands folded tightly in my lap. I wanted to disappear, to melt beneath the tablecloth. But worse than the laughter was Hannah's face. She wasn't embarrassed by the jokes she was in on them, nodding, smiling as though it were perfectly acceptable to humiliate her mother in front of 200 guests. And that realization hurt far deeper than any stranger's laughter ever could. I had barely recovered from Hannah's speech when Mark approached me during the cocktail hour. He placed a firm hand on my shoulder and leaned down with a smile that looked more like pity than affection. "Elaine, thanks for being such a good sport tonight," he said, guiding me toward a quieter corner near the hallway that led to the restrooms. My stomach tightened. I braced myself. I know Hannah can get carried away with her humor. He continued, lowering his voice as if offering comfort. "But don't take it personally. Everyone knows your consulting thing is just, well, something to keep you busy." I blinked. "My consulting thing." He chuckled softly, as though I had just confirmed his point. "Yeah, it's great that you're staying active. But let's be honest, at your age, it's not about building a career anymore. It's about keeping your mind sharp, giving you purpose. That's what hobbies are for." I felt heat rush to my face, not from shame, but from fury, pressing hard against my ribcage. I wanted to tell him about the companies I'd acquired, the contracts stacked in my office drawer, the millions under management. Instead, I pressed my lips into a thin line and let him continue. "Just don't stress yourself," he said, patting my arm as if I were a fragile relic. "Hannah and I will take care of the serious stuff. You just enjoy life, all right?" I nodded once, forcing composure. He had no idea how deeply those words cut. As he turned back toward the dance floor, I stood in the hallway alone, the music muffled behind closed doors, my throat tight with unshed tears. It wasn't just strangers laughing at me anymore. It was my own family telling me to know my place. I was still steadying myself in that hallway when I saw Richard Hale approaching. Tall, composed, his tuxedo crisp, he carried the air of someone used to commanding boardrooms. I had been avoiding him all evening, determined not to risk another conversation that would reduce my work to a hobby. But he caught my eye, and it was too late to slip away. "Mrs. Morgan," he said politely, extending a hand. "I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Richard Hale, Mark's supervisor at Hale Technologies." I shook his hand, my smile measured. "It's Ms. Morgan, actually. And yes, I know who you are." He tilted his head, curious. "Mark mentioned you do business consulting." "That's wonderful. What sort of work is it?" For a moment I considered brushing it off, keeping to the script Hannah had begged me to follow. But something inside me snapped. After a night of biting my tongue, I was done shrinking. "Well," I said carefully, "I focus on acquisitions and operational consulting. I work primarily with mid-sized companies that need guidance to scale and restructure." His brows lifted slightly. "That's quite specialized. How long have you been in that space?" "About 2 years, seriously," I answered, meeting his gaze, "though I've been building toward it for decades." "Impressive," he murmured, though I could see the skepticism in his eyes. Any firms I might know, I hesitated only a beat. Then I spoke the truth. "Yes. I recently acquired Hale Technologies." His expression froze. The polite smile drained from his face as if someone had flipped a switch. He blinked hard, staring at me. You acquired Hale. I nodded once. Through Morgan Strategies. The acquisition closed last quarter. The glass in his hand trembled. In that moment, the entire balance of the evening shifted. Richard's reaction alone would have been enough to vindicate me, but he didn't stop there. His eyes darted across the ballroom, then back to me, as if he couldn't contain what he had just learned. "Ms. Morgan," he whispered urgently, "do you realize half this room works for companies under your portfolio?" Before I could answer, he straightened his jacket and walked toward the stage. I felt panic rise in my chest. "Richard, please," I tried, but he was already taking the microphone from the DJ. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice rang out, echoing beneath the chandeliers. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. 200 faces turned toward him, confusion rippling through the crowd. "I need to correct a terrible misunderstanding." He continued, his gaze sweeping across the room before landing squarely on me. "We've spent this evening laughing at Miss Elaine Morgan treating her business as if it were some whimsical pastime. But what none of you realized, including myself until just now, is that Ms. Morgan is in fact the founder and principal of Morgan Strategies. She is not dabbling. She is the woman who acquired Hale Technologies, the very company where I serve as Chief Operating Officer." A stunned silence fell over the room. Forks clattered onto plates. Gasps echoed. I heard someone mutter, "You're joking," while another guest nearly dropped their glass. Richard pressed on, his voice sharper now. "She has quietly built a portfolio of firms valued in the tens of millions. Many of you here are employed by companies she owns. And tonight, while mocking her supposed late-life crisis, you've essentially been mocking your own boss." All eyes turned to me. Hannah's mouth hung open, her face pale. Mark looked like he'd swallowed poison. The laughter that had filled the room earlier was gone, replaced by a heavy, reverent silence. Richard's words were still hanging in the air when he turned and handed me the microphone. 200 people sat frozen eyes locked on me, as if the room itself had stopped breathing. I felt my hands tremble, but my voice came out steady. "Yes," I said, letting the silence stretch for a beat. "It's true. I am the founder of Morgan Strategies. For the past 2 years, I've acquired and rebuilt companies that now employ hundreds of people." A murmur ran through the crowd, but I kept my eyes on Hannah. She looked like she'd been struck, her lips parting in disbelief. "I never told you," I continued softly, "because every time I tried, you dismissed me. You called my work a phase, a hobby, a crisis. Tonight you stood before all these people and told them my dreams had expiration dates. What you didn't know was that those dreams were already reality." Hannah's face flushed crimson. "Mom? Why didn't you just say so?" Her voice cracked, barely audible. I swallowed hard. "Because you didn't want to hear it. You asked me to stay quiet tonight so I wouldn't embarrass you. But Hannah, I wasn't the one embarrassing us. You were." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They landed with the weight of everything I had held back for years. The ballroom was silent again, the kind of silence that comes when truth has no room left to hide. The reception never truly returned to the easy laughter it had before. People still danced, the band still played, but the air was heavier, tinged with unease. Guests who had laughed the loudest at me earlier now avoided my eyes or else rushed forward with clumsy apologies. I accepted them with a polite smile, but inside I wasn't thinking about them. My attention was fixed on Hannah. She approached me only once before leaving for her honeymoon, her eyes red, her voice trembling. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I was cruel and you just let me humiliate you." I touched her hand gently. "Because it was your wedding day. I didn't want to take that from you, even if it cost me my dignity." Her tears spilled then, but I didn't hug her. Not yet. "Respect isn't a gift, Hannah," I said quietly. "It's a choice. You chose not to give it. That will take time to mend." In the months that followed, everything shifted. Mark began addressing me as Ms. Morgan at family dinners, suddenly careful with every word. My sister, once quick to lecture me about realistic expectations, now bragged to her friends about her successful sibling. Even colleagues who had looked past me at the wedding reached out with consulting contracts. But Hannah, that relationship took longer. She wanted things to snap back to normal, but I drew boundaries. We entered therapy together. She squirmed at first, but slowly began to understand the depth of what she'd done. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was erasure. Now, when I walk into a room, I don't shrink, not even with family. I know who I am, and I refuse to be underestimated. Because the greatest lesson I've learned at 61 is this: never let anyone, not even your own child, decide when your dreams expire. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.